Hello, BookTube. This is Mike Frost, the postmodern poetry prognosticator, and here today. I want to talk to you about a book I just got in the mail. I should have done it as a mail haul, but saw it in the mail. Was so excited, opened it. Should have waited till I got the camera out to open it, but I opened it, started browsing through it, and I realized, wait a minute, I should share this moment with some of the poetry people out in BookTube. This is the new book that I just got in, Songs of Giants, the poetry of Robert E. Howard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and H.P. Lovecraft. It's two of the three of my favorite authors. I do like Lovecraft, but I wouldn't put him up there as I would Robert E. Howard or Edgar Rice Burroughs. All three, though, are not known for their poetry. They're not poets per se. They write poetry, wrote poetry. But they're better known for other writings other than poetry. And I don't even know. I've once owned a collection of poetry by Robert E. Howard. I loaned it to somebody, never got it back. I will have to find another copy of that. I know Lovecraft has a collection of poetry, so he wrote enough poetry to put it in a collection. I know of that, but I've never seen one. I've always kept my eye open for it in poetry sections, as I have trying to replace my Howard book. But I don't know if Edgar Rice Burroughs ever wrote enough poetry to put in a collection, to be perfectly honest. I know a lot about his writings, but and probably have read everything that he's ever written. But I don't know if if he wrote it. I've read some of his poems. I see a few of them that I've read before in this book, but I don't know if he's got enough to make a collection. But so it, I was so excited. It is illustrated by Mark Wheatley. Mark Wheatley, I met him in a Facebook format somewhere. He's an illustrator, and we shared a few books that we remember from long ago that were illustrated, the long ago illustrations, a lot of pulp. And I connected with Facebook, and then I saw him start this project, so I supported it through Kickstarter, and so happy I did. I'll show you some of the illustrations that we go into the book. But here's front covers. Some other. I hope you can get this in there. I will link something from him below. I hope I can get some kind of link to where you can connect to him. I don't think this is available on Amazon, at least not as yet. I think it's only through Kickstarter. I'll see if I can put some kind of connection to that below. But I was so excited, and I have opened the book. I've looked into it, and this is not the complete collections of Robert E. Howard. He's written a lot more. Not a complete collection of the Lovecraft poems. I don't know about the Burroughs poems, to be perfectly honest with you, but some of the best poems of each. And then I suppose because he's trying to show a variety of poems, he's put in other poems that I don't normally associate with Robert E. Howard or Lovecraft, but they're there. So anyway, so there's an introduction. I skimmed through that. It's not a real detailed introduction. I suppose it's more about the illustrations and the poetry than the introduction. You can get a really good introduction to Robert E. Howard or Lovecraft or Burroughs online or in any of their books. But this is not the kind of poetry we normally talk about, but I gathered a few books around me. I'm ill prepared for this thing, so I'm just going to run through it. Now, of course, we can start with Burroughs, who's probably the most well-known of these writers. He wrote the Tarzan series. There's 24 novels of the Tarzan series, and I've got all 24. I go through them all the time. One of my favorite series of Edgar Rice Burroughs is the Mars series. There was a movie put out I'll have to differ with Steve Donahue on this. The movies are never better than the books. And case in point is this. Now, I understand why they changed the movie to a modern audience. These writers were writing in the early 1900s. There's misogyny, there's other elements to it. The modern audience wouldn't take the damsel in distress kind of motif that's rampant through most of these writers, for good reason. They were paid better. So I don't think Burroughs, but I know Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft were associated with Weird Magazine, and Weird Magazine paid more for the cover stories. So the more and what sold on the covers of those magazines were scantily clad women, often chained or bound or under threat, and a hero come in and rescue them. So if you wrote a story like that, you got to the cover, or you got a chance of getting the cover, which paid more. So they wrote to the audience, they wrote to the magazines so that they could get hopefully get that cover story and get paid better. That's why you have on Conan books. Okay, so now Robert E. Howard is best known, of course, for as a creator of Conan the Barbarian, and I have let's see here, a few collections of Conan the Barbarian, a few of his collections. But besides Conan, Robert E. Howard introduced us to characters like Brack MacMorn and Cormac MacArc and Red Sonja. Red Sonja was a movie, wasn't it? Maybe she was in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I don't remember, but Red Sonja, another one of his characters. Solomon Kane. Oh, as a New Englander, I'm kind of partial to Solomon Kane. And Lovecraft. I only have one book of Lovecraft. I enjoy his writings, but I like the more sparse types of writing of Robert E. Howard, so that's probably my favorite type of writing. Edgar Burroughs. A lot of his stories repeat themselves, but always entertaining. I love it. But I do have the Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos, and what Lovecraft did with his Cthulhu, well, with all of his mythos, is he encouraged other writers, and Robert E. Howard and he had correspondence, but he encouraged all other writers to take this mythos. Now, if you're not familiar with Lovecraft, there's horror that is like slice and dice and murder mysteries and those kinds of horror kind of thing. Lovecraft created more of a mythos type horror where it's not a slice and dice, but it is the basic fabric of reality breaks. It's that kind of horror where the laws of nature suddenly aren't working, and that kind of horror where it's an existential almost horror that comes out. It's not a fear of a bad guy or something like, well, there are monsters and gods of various types. But it's more of this whole break with reality. When reality breaks down, or the laws of nature break down, it creates a mythos where alien monsters and gods invade what we call our reality. That sort of mythos, and he encouraged other writers to basically steal from him, borrow his stuff, and use his mythos to create. And Robert E. Howard did so. So you have some Cthulhu type stories from Robert E. Howard, which are very well done, and done in the Robert E. Howard sort of less verbose kind of language. So I enjoy these more actually than the Lovecraft one. But Robert E. Howard created a lot of different characters in his short writing career, short life for that matter. So you got Lovecraft, Burroughs, and Howard. All of these writers have adventure stories mostly, or horror in the case of Lovecraft. But all three did write some poetry, and it's never going to go down in the anthologies of the greatest poetry of the English language. But come on, people, let's just have some fun with this. And in this beautiful book, and as I'm going through this thing, I'm just going to give you a couple of snippets from inside here, just to give you a taste of what we're talking about. The first one is Halloween in the Suburb by H.P. Lovecraft. Just a little snippet, a little top thing here. The steeples are white in the wild moonlight, and the trees have a silver glare. Past the chimneys high, see the vampires fly, and the harpies of upper air that flutter and laugh and stare. For the village is dead to the moon outspread, never shone to the sunlight's gleam, but grew out of the deep that the dead years keep. and the rivers of madness stream. Now that's Lovecraft. That's just Lovecraft at his core. So we got some Robert E. Howard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote a poem about poverty that I had not seen before. So this one was new to me, just basically. And then another. Now Lovecraft, mainly known for his horror, also wrote. I don't know if you can see that illustration. This is a Lovecraft poem. That is more along the lines of a Robert E. Howard. Obviously, the two knew each other, and they knew each other through letters anyway, and corresponded back and forth. But this is from Lovecraft, the horror writer, not Robert E. Howard, where you would expect it from. And the illustrations on this thing. Some illustrations. The mighty Woden laughs upon his throne, and once more claims his children for his own. The voice of Thor resounds again on high, while armed Valkyries ride from out the sky. The gods of Asgard, all their powers released to rouse the dullard from his dream of peace. Awake, ye hypocrites, and deign to scan the actions of your brotherhood of man. Could your shrill pipings in the race impair the warlike impulse put by nature there? Where now the gentle maxims of the school, the chant of preachers, the golden rule? What feeble word or doctrine now can stay the tribe whose fathers own Valhalla's sway? Too long restrained, the bloody tempest breaks, the Midgard 'neath the tread of warriors shake. On to thy death, berserker bold, and try in acts of godlike bravery to die. Who cares to find the haven of the priest, when only warriors can the Woden feast? And that's just a snippet. It goes on like that. It's just okay. So as soon as I get this book, and as soon as I sat down, I just see myself. I'm now sitting in my what we call the fireplace room. The fireplace is right over there, and I'm on a big comfy chair, and I can't wait for the first rainstorm to come in, and I'm going to put this book in front of me, and I'm going to get my poetry down. I'm going to get my Robert Service poetry down. And okay, these writers don't have the beautiful musical ear of Edgar Allan Poe. Let's be for real. And they may not have the reality-based storylines and sometimes not even Robert Service has got wonderful humor. But these guys, I mean, let's get a rainy night going. Fireplace in the fire. I'm going to light some candles up here where I can read by candlelight, and I'm going to sit down in this big comfy chair with this book, and I'm going to enjoy some of this poetry. Let me tell you that. It's going to be fun. Dreaming of the Downs by Robert E. Howard. There's another one, beautiful illustration. I hope I can get a connection to some, you can see some better of this, but and here's one by Lovecraft. Now I suppose he's trying to Mark Wheatley is trying to gather some of the not so normal, not so regular poems by Lovecraft. So there's some that you wouldn't like the Valhalla poem by Lovecraft. You wouldn't normally associate the warlike one with Lovecraft. You would think horror, but in this case, he's writing basically a patriotic poem about America entering into the First World War. And Robert E. Howard, here's another one by Robert E. Howard. Now, most of the poems in here, and typical of Robert E. Howard, which you wouldn't really expect, they're more songs than they're poems that are lyrics, really. I mean, you could put these things to music. This one, A Lady's Chamber by Robert Howard. Orchid, jasmine, and heliotrope scent the gloom where the dead men grope. Silver, ruby-eyed lepers crouch at the cavern's ends at the silken couch. A purple mist and a perfume rare billows and sways and weighs the air. There's a musicality to this, to a lot of Robert E. Howard stuff, and that could all be put to music if you had the talent. I don't, but if you had the talent, you could. My Mother Was a Wildcat by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I don't know how true that story would be, but I will rise someday when the day is done and the stars begin to quiver, and I will follow the road of the setting sun till I come to a dreaming river. That's Surrender. Oh, so here's what I was familiar with, and it reminds me of Steve Donahue. I think this probably or may have been dedicated to Steve Donahue. It's The Cats by H.P. Lovecraft, and for Steve, I will read it. Babbles of blocks to the high heavens towering, flames of fertility swirling below, poisonous fungi in brick and stone flowering, lanterns that shudder and death lights that glow, black monstrous bridges cross oily rivers, cobwebs of cables to nameless things spun, catacomb deeps whose dark chaos delivers streams of live odor that rots in the sun. Color and splendor, disease and decay, shrieking and ringing and clawing insane, rabbles exotic to stranger gods praying, jumbles of odors that stifle the brain. Legions of cats from the alleys nocturnal, howling and lean in the glare of the moon, screaming the future with mouthfuls infernal, yelling the garden of Pluto's red rune. Tall towers and pyramids ivied and crumbling, bats that swoop low in the wee crumbling streets, bleak Arkham bridges over rivers whose rumbling join no voice in the thick horde retreats. Belfries that buckle against the moon totter, caverns whose mouths are by mosses effaced, and living to answer the wind and the water, only the lean cats that howl in the wastes. I'm sure that was probably dedicated to Steve Donahue somewhere. I'll have to check the historical records and find out if Lovecraft had Steve in mind. Solomon Kane's Homecoming with Robert E. Howard. Now, I told you he, one of the main characters in Robert E. Howard created was Solomon Kane, a New Englander, Puritan. Did swashbuckling. I think there was a movie about him, I believe. I've never actually seen it. I don't often watch movies associated. Well, maybe I have seen it. Oh, I'll have to remember that, but nothing matches to the books. Passing of My Old Pal Bill by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I don't know if you can see the illustration. Burroughs, which most people are not familiar with, because they think of Edgar Rice Burroughs, they think of Tarzan, they think of the Mars series, the Venus series, the Earth's core stuff, the molecular art. But he also wrote many Westerns. And the poetry that I'm familiar with Edgar Rice Burroughs are mostly Western poets. Of course, he's a Texas guy. And of course, I've got a couple of first editions of The Mucker that I keep around. The Return of the Mucker. But he Girl from Hollywood was Western. So he does write Westerns. He did write Westerns. And this is, a poem by him. It's a story poem, so I won't go through the thing, but it has the feel of a Robert Service kind of poetry. Here's another one by Robert E. Howard, The Riders of Babylon. It's more you would associate with Robert E. Howard. I can't wait for a rainy night where I can sit. No more of this sunshine. We need a rain so I can sit under candlelight and read some of these things. Get my Poe out. Cormac by Robert E. Howard. Lock your arms of iron round the reeling moon. Draw your sword, the gray sword, the sword of Finn, the fey sword, carved with nameless runes. Brace your feet like talons on the dreaming world. Break the shapes, the dread shapes, the dragon shapes, the red apes out of the abyss hurled. You gotta love that stuff. Red Thunder, Robert E. Howard, about the devil coming out to play. One would not associate H.P. Lovecraft with a Christmas poem, but And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't know it until I opened this book that he wrote even a Christmas poem. Nice little ditty. Another one by Lovecraft that I was struck by. It's more of a pastoral. It's not a horror. It's more like a pastoral poem. Let other bards with nobler talents sing the beauties of the mild, maturing spring. My rustic muse on bleaker times must dwell, when earth, but new-shaped from winter's spell, unclothed, unsheltered, unadorned is seen, stripped of white robes, nor yet arrayed in green. Hard blows the breeze, but with the warmer force, the melting ground, the brimming watercourse, the wakening air, the birds' returning flight, the longer sunshine and the shorter nights. And it goes on like it's just more or less a pastoral, which is quite pleasant, actually. Robert E. Howard, The Sea. I know this will also appeal to Steve Donahue and his Toeth by Sea crowd. The sea, the rolling sea, high-flung, wide-swinging, so wild and free, the leaping waves with their white-capped crests, the plunge and lunge on the ocean's breast, like wild white horses racing free with the swing and the rolling, surging sea. The white sea cloud that drifts like a dream, the seagull in the skimmed over the waves and scream, the dolphin's plunge, the petrel's nest, that is born to land on the tide-raced crest. And all that goes from mid-ocean to lee will make up the rolling, the surging sea. It's just the first couple of lines, but it's a lovely poem. Nightmare Lake, H.P. Lovecraft. I've read this before. That is Lovecraft, this thing, the lake. There is a lake in the distance, and beyond the wotan haunts of man, where broods alone in a hideous state, a spirit dead and desolate, a spirit ancient and unholy, heavy with fearsome melancholy, which from the waters dull and dense draws vapors cursed with pestilence. Yeah, that's Lovecraft. Let's see here. Midnight Song, Robert E. Howard, a song at midnight about the gallows tree, waiting for its next victim, longing for the next to be hung on the gallows tree. Nemesis by H.P. Lovecraft, another of the typical H.P. Lovecraft. Tides, Robert E. Howard, another sea poem by Robert E. Howard. I wasn't familiar with that one, but and then we have Edgar Rice Burroughs writing another Western, another tale. This one a funny story. Well, let's end with the funny story here. This is from Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is one of his Western poems. The only poems that I'm familiar with. And if he's written anything else, or if anybody else knows of anything, poetry by Edgar Rice Burroughs, please let me know. I stood at the bar is the title of this poem. I stood at the bar in the Spread Eagle bar, a-drinkin' a drink whilst I smoked a cigar. When in walks a gent that I ain't never seen, and he lets out a beller and then says he, I am the original bad nun. I am. I eats 'em alive and I don't give a damn. How how fast they come or how many they be, of all the bad hombres, the worst one is me. So bring on your bad one, your killers and sich, and send 'em out greasers to dig us a ditch. For when I gets through, if I takes any pains, you'll need a big hole to plant their remains. He twirls 2 big guns and he shoots out the lights. The fellers are drinking their ducks at the sight. He shoots through a bottle that stands at the bar and shoots an old ash plumb out of my cigar. Come set up the bottles, you old dern galoot, says he to the boss. For I opens to snoot with one of these here little babies of mine and shoots out the no in the no credit sign. The bossy crawls out, then shaking in white from under the bar where he's been sitting tight. Now set out the pizen right pronto, you coot, the stranger remarks, or I'll shoot till I shoot. I only been practicing so far, says he. A barkeeper too don't mean nothing to me. Most of those I has for one breakfast each day. I don't mean no harm. It's just my way. Come here, he yells to the rest of us boys. Set up to the funeral and don't make no noise. And while you intern all this barbed wire that's here, after which we'll dispose of cigars and beer. And so we lines up at the bar 12 or more. The boss tries to smile, but he can't because he's sore. The stranger says, "Pronto, you darn little runt." Just then he hears someone out front. And turning to look, we see there in the door a thin little woman. My gosh, she is poor. Who lets her eyes range till they rest on this bloke with funny ideas about what is a joke. She walks right across and takes hold of his ear. "You old ornery buzzard," she says, "you come here." He gives us a smile that went knock-kneed and lame. And, "Yes, dear, I'm coming," he says. And he came. By Edgar Rice Burroughs. Pan by H.P. Lovecraft, not one you would associate, but another pastoral by H.P. Lovecraft. It's a wonderful poem. And then at the end, he gives some bios of Robert E. Howard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and one of H.P. Lovecraft, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, and then a little bit about him, Mark Wheatley. There's a picture of him. I don't know if you can see that. No. There's a good picture of Mark, whom I know from Facebook. That's the only place I know him from. So this is the book. I got it in the mail today, and I couldn't wait to share it with you. There are some other things that, again, I don't think this is available, at least not yet, anyway, on Amazon. But when I got it, it's got some pictures with it. This is the one about the cats. Maybe I'll send it to Steve. I'll have to find Steve's address, the back cover. And then I got some pictures of, there's Robert E. Howard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, all drawn, illustrated by H.P. Lovecraft, by Mark Wheatley. So very happy with it. Very happy with the book, the illustrations. It's beautiful. It's just what I was hoping for when I started supporting this thing on Kickstarter. I hope it can be available, massively available at most of the retail places, but I don't know if it is as yet. If you're interested at all in Edgar Rice Burroughs, Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, it's a sampling of their poems. Now, I don't know about the Burroughs. If anybody knows any other poems by Burroughs, please let me know. But I know there's a whole collection of Robert E. Howard, a whole collection for H.P. Lovecraft, and so this is a sampling of their stuff. And it's not all the poems are what you would associate, like all the poems by H.P. Lovecraft in this book are not horror ones. They're a mix. But I think they're just what Mark is trying to get at is that there's a wider variety than just horror associated with H.P. Lovecraft, or just sword and sorcery by Robert E. Howard. And certainly there's more to Edgar Rice Burroughs than just Tarzan, or my favorite series is the Mars series. There's more to them. The Westerns are entertaining. And I am waiting for the next rainy day. It's a beautiful, sunny day here in Rochester, New York, not a cloud in the sky. And for the first time, I think, in my life, I'm waiting for rain. I'm going to put some candles up, going to light a fire in that fireplace right over there. And I am going to sit back with this book, this large illustrated book, and I'm going to feel like a kid again and just read some wonderful, wonderful poetry. Until that time, though, book two, that's all for now. I hope you enjoy some poetry from these folks. If you can get a hold of a collection from any of these folks, or will they go down in anthologies as the great poetry of America? No, but let's have some fun with it, though. Have some fun with it, BookTube. We'll see you later. Bye.